Hello everybody and welcome back to Beyond the Textbook. Today I have with me the wonderful, unbelievable Masna, who's actually our teacher at the moment, and I will hand it over to Masna, and I would like Masna for you to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Oh, thank you very much for that great introduction, Aisha. Yes, I'm Masna. I'm half Malaysian. My dad's Malaysian. My mom's from Northern Ireland. I've actually started off life as a lawyer, believe it or not, but I saw the light and changed professions and retrained and became a teacher. In fact, we met
Exactly.
when I was teaching at Garden School.
Exactly.
Too many years ago.
Oh, let's not mention.
And then I sort of got sucked back into the corporate world, but I mean, as a trainer. And then, recently you invited me to come back and teach at your center. So thanks very much for that opportunity as well.
You're most welcome, Masna, and it's been a pleasure. So what I wanted to talk about today is, if you have been following us on this podcast, you'll know that we haven't actually released a podcast for a while, and there's been a good reason for that. One of the main reasons is that we've been very busy. I know that's a cliche, but in fact, what we've been doing is we have been doing a lot of teaching for refugees in the evening, which has kind of consumed a lot of my time. Now, one of the reasons why Masna is back with us now is because she's also one of the teachers for these refugee classes. But what I'd like to do with this podcast is we want to talk a little bit about the refugee status in Malaysia, and then we'll talk a little bit more about how ELIT got involved with that, how do we find teaching them, and so on. We'll just get into some aspects of that. So first of all, one of the most important and most interesting things about Malaysia is that, believe it or not, there are in fact 178,000 refugees in this country.
Wow. You see, now that's something I didn't know.
Well, that's a lot. And in fact, if you look at on world standards, that's pretty high up there with like Turkey and some of these other countries that have a huge amount of Syrians and so on. So the very interesting thing about the 178,000 is that 150,000 of them are from Myanmar.
Okay, the Rohingya.
Yeah, the Rohingya people. Some are not Rohingya, but most are Rohingya. And the whole Rohingya crisis is another thing again, which we talk about at a different time. Of the other 28,000, I think we have Somalis, we have Syrians, Afghanis, people from Sri Lanka, from Yemen. I know there's a few Iraqis here, also Libyans. These are all people who are essentially doing the refugee thing, which is seeking asylum in another country because their own country is in a state of crisis. So the really interesting thing in Malaysia is, first of all, that there are so many here, and their kind of open policy about that. I'm reluctant to say that it's a rule, but I know, and I've mentioned in other podcasts, that Malaysia has an interesting immigration policy, which is that people from these kinds of countries can actually enter on a social visa, which is very few countries in the world allow that. And I believe what they do, these refugees, is they come here on their social visa, and then they can go to the UNHCR office here, and they can become declared as a refugee. So there's a kind of process they go through. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but I think that's a very unique situation. Because when we think of refugees, we tend to think of the Turkey-Hungary thing, which
Absolutely,
is
or people coming on a boat.
Exactly. And kind of climbing over walls or digging tunnels or
that kind of thing. yeah.
But actually in Malaysia they come here by plane.
That's very interesting. That's something that I didn't know, and actually I think that's great of Malaysia to accept refugees in that way.
Yeah. Saying that, I better just correct it that actually the Rohingya don't come that way.
Okay.
They do tend to
yes,
come by boats,
yes.
and that's a different story.
Right.
So yes, there's a huge amount of refugees here, and they in most countries, when there are refugees, they are put into detention centres. And if it's, for example, in Australia, they have an island, I'm not sure exactly the name, can't remember, but they put them on the island, and they are there basically in a jail situation until they are
processed.
And then I don't think Australia takes that many now.
Whereas in Malaysia, you were saying that they are basically free to come and go as they please, which again I didn't know. I also had this perception that they would be in some kind of detention, well, not so much detention, but at least that they'd all be staying together in one place, and then to discover that actually they are staying all over KL.
Exactly.
So, yeah, right.
and in fact, they're staying in condos or swimming pools and gyms. For people from the Western world, that's quite shocking.
Right.
Because if you're a refugee, you tag all these things onto that kind of person that you think they're poor, you think they're destitute, you think they've been through hell. I'm not saying they haven't. A lot of them have. But when they get to Malaysia, because there aren't these kind of detention centres for refugees, as far as I know, they are free to live as a person here.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
And I know that. But saying that, they do have all the same. If they get a UNHCR card, they are subject to all the other requirements of the international law about refugees.
Absolutely. And as we were discussing, also, that they don't have any legal status in this country. So despite, the perception that they're living in condos or whatever, as you said, they have no legal status. Their children can't go to school. They don't have access to healthcare, so it is still a very hard life for them with no real so much uncertainty hanging over them about their future as well. So it is hard.
It is, yes. And I think that one of the most challenging things is that because they don't have access to the healthcare and the education and so on, they are really in limbo, and they don't know what to do with their day as they sit and they wait, day after day after day.
Exactly.
I do know that they don't receive any money from UNHCR. If they want to live in a condo with a swimming pool and a gym, they have to pay for that.
So where are their funds from? Is that from family?
I think that
abroad?
Extended family overseas. I think they receive that money through. I don't know how they get that money, but the money gets sent to them somehow, and that will pay for the apartment. It'll pay for food, and because they have to live.
Exactly.
They're human beings who still have to live.
Yes, and on top of that, because they don't have legal status, they can't work either. So that's another huge thing.
That's right.
For them as well, a problem for them.
Yes.
So.
Yes. And because they can't work legally, that is. They are, unfortunately, they're living in the shadows. And I think anybody who has had anything to do with refugees in this country know that there are some people who've been here for 10, 12, 15 years who are, have married, who have got children, had children here. They've lived an entire life in the shadows. And the next question, of course, is where are these people?
Right.
because when we walk down the street, we see people living their lives. We just wonder, well, where are all these 178,000 refugees? Where are they? And they're not all in one place.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're all over the place, right?
So where are they?
Yeah.
Where do you think they are?
Churras, from what some of my students tell me, and Gomba and areas like that.
Right,
you know?
yeah.
But again, as you say, they're in the shadows. They don't have, although, you know, that Malaysia accepts them, but they don't have any legal status. So they're always fearful. You know, like I remember there was one evening, some of them didn't turn up, quite a few didn't turn up for class because apparently there was a rumor going around that the police were cracking down on immigrants, illegal immigrants. So it's a very uncertain life for them, you know. Yeah,
it's interesting because they give up their life in a very uncertain place, meaning their country, to live an even more uncertain life. But obviously, it's a better option for them.
Yes, exactly. So, you know, that just goes to show how bad things must be in their own country for them to uproot and come here and with all this uncertainty hanging over their heads for themselves, for their children. So yeah, it's tough.
And the other thing is that, as you know, the classes that we teach are predominantly the ages between 15 and 25. We have some older people, but most of these are young adults or teenagers. And these are, some of them, as I say, have been here for 10 years. And the question is, what have they done for the last 10 years?
Exactly.
Some of them have actually had some schooling. So in Malaysia there are some refugee schools. Some of them are extremely well organized and funded by local charities. Then there are others that are not so well funded, so they don't actually get a particularly good education. But the other thing that I find most interesting is that they're not eligible to receive certificates and qualifications. Whatever course they do, they aren't actually going to receive anything out of it at the end except what it is they digest during the day.
I know, it's in a way it's quite heartbreaking, you know. What's their future, you know? What are they, you know, like you said, a lot of them are in their sort of late teens, you know, early 20s. Well, what's going to happen to these people? And even when you speak to them and say, so what are your goals? You know, it's very hard for them to have real goals or ambition because, you know, the future's so uncertain for them.
Yes.
You know, and all they can say is, they want to learn English and you know, because this is important and rightly so. So I think this is great what you're doing for them, Aisha. You know.
Well, that takes us on to the next role, the next question, which is what are we doing and why? So we already have a lot of Somali students who are legitimate students from Somalia who've come here to study English, to go to university here. These students have always talked about the refugee situation for Somalis in Malaysia. So really it was a few months ago we got connected to someone who said, are you willing to offer some classes for these students? Well, we said, yes, we are, thinking there would be maybe 40, 50 students. Well, we had 125 turn up. And they came, we gave them the placement test, we put them into 3 levels, and of course you came along and took over this. But I think the interesting thing about it is, well, how are our goals for this class different from our mainstream? I think our mainstream students, their personal goals are very clear. They're going to university, or they need it for their job, or they need it because they're going back to their country to do business, they need English. It's very clear what their goals are. For these students, as you said, it's very unclear because their future is so unclear.
Absolutely.
So one of the questions that came up was, which you rightly asked, was, well, why are we doing this? What is our goal for these students? And actually what I see is that they are here to study English to improve their online experience, because technically they can't work, so it's not like they're going to get a certificate to get a job. They're not trying to pass the IELTS to get to university, because they can't enter university here. They're not supposed to be doing business here, so why are we teaching them English? And I think that the part about that is there's two parts to that. One is that we teach them English because it's a global language, and you have to, you're just going to be a better, more global person, but also because of their online activity. That's one of the most important things.
Yeah, and the interesting thing, in a way, and also the irony of it, is that these students, the refugee students, despite not having a clear goal or a clear aim, are the most enthusiastic, keen students. I remember, Aisha, when you said, oh, by the way, you have 38 students in your class on that first month. And I was like, what? And you were saying, oh, don't worry, half of them will drop out. Well, not a single one dropped out. And in fact, they're so keen and so enthusiastic, which I think is great. It's compared to even your so-called normal students who do have a purpose, are not as motivated as these refugee students. And I think it's great.
Well, I think there's a few reasons why they're here. Our role is, as I said, to give them an opportunity to prove their English, because the world's going to be all online in the future anyway. So they need this opportunity as much as anybody else. But also there were a few reasons, actually, if I remember rightly, was that they often come for a social side.
Okay.
And when I say that, it's not like, we're just taking anybody just for a cup of tea and a chit-chat. No, we have properly structured courses.
Absolutely.
They sit exams, and we will give them a certificate of some kind that they can take away with them. But there are also a lot of them who do not do anything much with their day. And the highlight of coming to a class in the evening where they're going to enrich themselves in some way or learn something gives them some sense of purpose on a daily basis. I know there are a whole group of women, for example, who just keep saying thank you.
I know, right? Yeah.
You had that, right?
Yes. Thank you, teacher. Thank you so much. And they're so sort of grateful for us, for this opportunity to come and learn English.
And because they just don't want to stay at home inside those four walls any longer. They want something to give themselves that kick in their day that makes them feel excited about waking up, and because they're all waiting. They're all waiting for that piece of paper that's going to say, okay, you're set, you're off to Kentucky, right. Or you're off to Brisbane or wherever,
I know. And I think I can definitely see, we are into our second month now. I can definitely see with some of the students how they've really improved in their self-confidence. For example, I had one lady in my class last month, I think I told you about her, and when she was doing her test, she said to me, her husband told her, if you don't pass, you're not coming again. And I was so thrilled that she was actually one of the high scorers, you know.
Wow.
So she, you know, to have some kind of, confidence that hey, she could do it, you know, as opposed to, when she has this husband say, if you fail, you're not, you're going to fail and you're not coming back. And she actually turned out to be one of the high scorers. I was so happy for her.
Wow, that's great. Yeah. And which leads us on to the other point, which is that it's incredible how great some of their English is.
Yes. And I think we were discussing this earlier. I mean, like you said, they range from, late teens to, I think, one student, my class, she was in her 50s,
Wow.
which is young, right?
Of course. Very young.
But and then the sort of range, the abilities as well. And generally, the younger refugees tend to be better, their ability than the older ones. And I think this is because of their access to the internet. They all watch videos on YouTube, and they're very familiar, of course, with technology, which is great. Like last month I had some of the older women, they didn't know how to put their phones on silent.
Yes.
Whereas, the younger ones are completely familiar with technology.
Exactly.
and very comfortable with it.
Yeah. And the other thing that's interesting is that even though legally they're not allowed to work, they're not allowed to have so many things. The other thing that's interesting is that some of them do actually work, but it's all in the shadows, and I think Malaysians know that, Malaysian authorities know that, but though technically they're not allowed to, they have to survive somehow.
Absolutely.
And that's also another way they pick up their English. This is one of the things I noticed with the class I'm teaching is that they are very good at talking.
Yes.
But their actual written English is very weak.
Yes.
And
then you also get the ones whose written is very good, but just don't want to say anything.
Yeah, exactly. But I think it comes down to it's their street English. They've lived here for 10 years. They've been talking with Malaysians and all kinds of nationalities, and they've never had to. They've just picked it up.
Yes.
But they've never. The ones I'm talking about, they've never had to actually write anything down except maybe their name and their number, their UNHCR number, whatever it is, and that's it.
Right.
Everything else is just how much is that? Okay, right. So and
I think this is the other great thing about being in Malaysia is that they have that opportunity to practice their English, rather than just be in in another country where they don't have that opportunity. So that's great.
So if they do get the chance to go to the US or to Canada, wherever they get sent, they are already pretty good with their English.
Especially spoken.
Because I do believe that when they do go to these countries, if they get fortunate enough to be accepted in these countries, a lot of them have to go through some kind of adjustment period. Often it's language and culture that they have to confront, and some of them, they find that very difficult. They think everything's going to be the same as it was back in the country. But one of the great things about Malaysia is it gives them that kind of like limbo period where they kind of get to flex their English muscles a bit. They get to sort of understand a little bit about like the developed world and about life in the modern world, and then they I'm sure those people that go straight to US after that, or Australia, wherever, they don't feel the jar of the cultural shock quite so much, perhaps.
Yes, I agree. I think Malaysia is a great sort of stepping stone for a lot of them. So, because it is a multiracial country as well, so they're exposed to all the different cultures. So I think this is a good place, and I think it's great that Malaysia's doing this as well. So.
Exactly, and it's one of those other things. I've said this on these podcasts in the past, that Malaysia is so unique in so many ways, and it never kind of flaunts what it does to the rest of the world. I'm talking about the positive things here.
Of course.
But there are so many interesting things that the Malaysian government does for particularly people who come from crisis countries. They open the doors for them, particularly for like student visas, for social visas. They welcome these people into the country. But I know Malaysia has very strict sort of internal sort of security, homeland security stuff.
Right.
I know they're very, very sharp in that area. So if there are any kind of like cells or anything popping up, they squash them immediately.
Yeah.
So the thing I find most interesting about that is they open the doors for these people from crisis countries where there is civil war going on, like Iraq, like Somalia, like Libya, like, even Yemen and so on. And yet, as far as I know, certainly in the last 10 years, there's not been a single terrorist attack in Malaysia. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
But there's been one in Indonesia, in Philippines, in Thailand, in Myanmar.
Right.
But there's never been one in Malaysia.
Touch wood.
Yeah. But I would say that's you would think it would be the opposite, because they're opening the doors to all these people.
Yes.
That the chance of there being some ISIS guy or some Al-Shabaab person turn up who's just wants to create a problem.
Right.
You think it would, the likelihood would be higher, but somehow it's not. I mean, I'm take my hat off to the Malaysian Internal Secret Service. I'm sure they're the ones who are on top of it.
Absolutely,
And as a result, Malaysia can give so much to the refugees and give them an opportunity. Though, saying all that, I know it's a very murky area for the legal status of refugees here.
Yeah. Well, I don't I don't really know that much about the process that they're going through, but my heart does go out to them. Can't be easy. And one thing you were saying about Malaysia, I think as a Malaysian myself, it's lovely to meet these refugees who sort of remind me of what a great place Malaysia is, because you do tend to get a bit jaded and cynical, right?
Yeah.
And then you have these students who are telling you, oh, Malaysia is the best, it's such a beautiful country and people are friendly. I'm like, actually.
Oh yeah, I guess it is, yeah. But of course, it's where they came from.
Absolutely, this is the thing, and we do have so much to be grateful for, and it's And this has been such an eye-opener for me. Thanks, Aisha, for giving me this opportunity. It's been such an eye-opener to meet these students, and they are great students. And
they really are.
They really are.
Yeah,
and they're so sweet, and and they go, we love you, teacher.
Well, that's always good for the ego. It's always good for the ego. But I mean, I think, as you said right at the start, they are so enthusiastic and they really work so hard. And our particular batch that we have, certainly the dropout rate is zero. And I don't think we've ever had any student who's had any more than 3 or 4 days off. They really are so determined to get that exam. They want to pass that exam. And as you also said, they never complain.
Right.
We have classes of like 45, 38, which is not our usual class size. Usually our class size is like 15 to 20 in the mainstream. But to have 35 to 45 students in the class, you'd think, as from a teacher's point of view, you think that would be a complete management headache. But it's not.
I know.
I don't know. It's hard to explain it.
Right.
They sit there quietly. They all bunch up together. They want to do their best. They might cheat from each other a bit more, but it doesn't matter. I mean, it's all good. It's all good. So on that note, I think we might close off this session now. And I hope other people have found this useful. It is a very interesting situation in Malaysia with refugees, and we at ELIT are just doing something that a lot of other places are also doing, and having these night classes. And essentially they are on an elite scholarship, if you like, because they don't pay anything much for it. So
that's amazing.
Yeah. So it's our giving back aspect of it.
Right.
So on this note, I want to thank you, Masna, for coming on the show.
Thank you. My first podcast ever.
Yeah. And also thank everybody for listening, and we'll be in touch again with our latest one not too far in the future. Okay. Thank you. Bye.